in case you guys were wondering, the United States is about 6 months away. Maybe not 6 months. I think that's a little bit of a conservative estimate. We are definitely, within the next few years, on track to become North Korea. The joke online is that the United States is already North Korea, but with a Gucci belt, which I feel is a very apt description. However, with Donald Trump's recent escalation of militarizing Washington, D.C., of talking about militarizing the rest of the country. And by the rest of the country, I mean specifically blue cities like Chicago, New York, Oakland, and Los Angeles. We're on our way to becoming North Korea, a full blown military dictatorship. Donald Trump is using Washington, D.C. as a testing ground for his implementation of martial law. He can only get away with doing this in Washington, D.C. because Washington, D.C. has no rights. They're not a state. It is a federal district. So the president of the United States is effectively allowed to do whatever the he wants, which, regardless of their statehood or not, should not be the case. As far as I'm concerned, Washington, D.C. should be a state. They should have all of the same protections and opportunities as New York, Rhode Island, California, Connecticut, Mississippi, Alabama, whatever. Donald Trump tried to do this in LA. It really didn't work because, again, Los Angeles is situated within California, and the deployment of the National Guard doesn't do anything because they only have jurisdiction to protect federal buildings, federal land, things of that nature. They can't just be walking around on the street. The governor of these states, the governor of a specific state, is the one who controls the National Guard. Of course, Donald Trump doesn't give a about any of that. If it's up to him, he will deploy the National Guard in Chicago, in New York, under the guise of crime being out of control, even though you're more likely to be murdered in Texas than in New York. You're more likely to be murdered in South Carolina.
Overnight, members of the National Guard now carrying weapons on patrol in Washington, D.C., the move marking a major escalation in President Trump's federal takeover of policing in the nation's capital.
Can we just acknowledge as citizens of the United States how fucking insane this looks? That we have military personnel, they have the blickies on them. They are fully strapped in the streets of Washington, D.C. This does not make anybody safer, nor is this an appropriate way to combat crime, which CNN is going to talk about a little bit later on. If this were happening in like literally any other country across the planet, the United States would be saying that the United States needs to intervene. And yet, North Korea style shit, Banana Republic style shit, underdeveloped nation dictatorship type shit is happening in the United States. And people just like don't fucking recognize it. No one has any like inkling that this is bad. They're seeing it, but it's not the urgency behind the situation doesn't resonate with them for some reason. And then you have people in right-wing media who were like, no, actually, this is good politics. I'm talking about Jesse Waters. You have people who were saying that this needs to be done all across the country. But when they say all across the country, they just mean in blue states. You have Stephen Miller who's saying that the opposition party, the Democratic Party, is a fucking terrorist organization. Hello? Open your eyes, man. Fuck.
And now he is threatening to deploy the troops to more American cities and states run by Democrats, including Baltimore, despite statistics from the mayor's office showing a 17% drop in violent crime from last year. The president has now fired back at Governor Wes Moore of Maryland, who invited him to Baltimore for a public safety walk. Trump responded by saying Moore needed to clean up the city's, quote, crime disaster before he would go for a walk there. The president also threatened to withhold funds to replace Baltimore's collapsed Francis Scott Key Bridge. And the president already said Chicago.
I know that there's no way for state governors to withhold the federal tax dollars because, as we know, states like New York and California provide more in tax dollars than they receive. However, as a taxpayer, your tax dollars automatically get sent to the IRS. It would just be really funny if one day Gavin Newsom came out and instructed all of his citizens to to withhold their federal taxes to effectively do tax fraud and then granted everybody immunity from prosecution. I don't know why. I just think that would be a really fucking funny way to go about this because otherwise the states really have no way of combating this withholding of federal funds. There are, well, like New York, Maryland, and I believe Chicago were among a few states who were talking about withholding federal payments. But again, there's really no way for the governors to fight back against the withholding of federal funds unless they grant immunity to all of their citizens who decide not to pay their taxes. I'm not advising you not to pay your taxes, by the way. Please continue to pay your taxes. I'm just making a joke. Because if I don't make jokes about the situation, I'm going to lose my fucking mind.
Will be the next city he would target for a federal deployment. Two officials have told CNN the Trump administration has been making plans to send the National Guard there for weeks. Police there have reported a 23% drop in violent crime from last year. Let's get right to CNN's Elena Treen at the White House for what appears to be, we're on the cusp of an expansion here.
Absolutely. And part of this, John, is the Trump administration is loving what they're seeing happening in Washington, D.C. They are the images of the National Guard troops in the city of the federal agents from ATF, DEA, FBI.
Please activate your brain. If you are someone who has this style of thinking, please turn your fucking brain on. They like the optics of what's going on in Washington, D.C. because the Republican Party and the Trump administration is a fascist administration. There's no way that anybody who believes in democracy can see images like this and think, nah, this is cool. The only way that you think that's cool is if you're literally 7 years old or if you're a fascist who wants a military-style dictatorship.
Yeah, the list goes on, deployed throughout the city to help with this. Even though we're seeing, we have seen, and we should note, since August 12th, about 2 weeks ago, when the president first issued this as being a national emergency, or a citywide emergency, I should say, and ordered these troops to be mobilized in D.C., there has been a moderate drop in crime. But one of the biggest things we've actually seen as a result of some of these actions...
Man, it's over. There's been a moderate drop in crime, dumbass, because crime has been dropping precipitously for the last fucking year. The continuation of a trend doesn't necessarily reflect any new developments within Washington, D.C. It's merely a continuation of an ongoing trend. If anything, the deployment of the National Guard, and I saw somewhere that they've made 900 arrests and gotten like 100 guns off the street. Yeah, that's great. How many of these arrests are actual criminals? How many of these arrests are for actually dangerous violations of the law? Put your fucking thinking cap on, man. The reason why crime is dropping in certain cities like Chicago, like Baltimore, like Washington, D.C. is because these elected officials are taking actionable steps to address crime as a social issue. They're not just going into these neighborhoods, harassing black and brown people and throwing them in jail. It's very well documented that Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott has reduced crime by actually creating opportunity within his city. And by opportunity, I mean specifically giving kids things to do, block parties, making events happen in the community. There is also cooperation between these communities and the police. If we talk about Chicago, for example, the main reason why the south side of Chicago is such a fucking war zone, right? We're talking about Chirac, after all, the home of King Von and Lil Durk and Chief Keef. The reason why these areas, which is an underserved area, is so rampant with crime is because the police don't fucking do anything to solve it. The Chicago police force solves 25% of crime that happens in Chicago. In New York, for example, that's up around 50%. If the police don't give a fuck to solve the murder of your friend or your cousin, you're going to seek retaliation. No one's doing anything, right? The police force isn't doing anything to bring justice to these people. So you feel that you have to bring justice to them yourself. Additionally, you have to tackle the root cause of crime as well, which is poverty. Police don't do that. Police are supposed to solve crime. They're supposed to bring people to justice. It is up to the state and local leaders to address these impoverished and underserved communities, to reinvest in these communities. So that way, people don't have to resort to doing street shit. They don't have to resort to robberies and burglaries and things of that nature. I'm not a police abolitionist. I recognize the need for a police force in society. I am a police reformist in the sense that police officers should be directing traffic, they should be solving crime, They should be beholden to the needs of the specific community that they serve. That does not happen in the United States. The military style takeover of Washington, D.C. is so far removed from how to actually deal with crime.
Widespread immigration raids and really a real significant ramp up in some of the deportations we have seen in this city. But to get to what he's ordered and what we've seen now with the National Guard troops. So now we've seen them beginning to carry weapons. Like, we should note, it's unclear how many of them are actually carrying weapons at this point and how long this is going to continue. But this is a significant escalation from when the president first ordered this emergency in the city. At first, we had heard the Defense Department say that they were not going to be armed, that they are not going to be carrying out arrests. Now we're, of course, seeing them, a lot of them starting yesterday, having their sidearms with them as part of what this administration, this White House is saying being a peacekeeping mission, really trying to still allow some of the other federal agents to do the work. But this all comes after we also saw Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, order this last week, order that national troops could be carrying this weapons. And I would note as well, it's not just the D.C. National Guard that is currently in Washington, D.C. There's also more than 1,900 troops from the National Guards in West Virginia, South Carolina, Mississippi, Ohio, Louisiana, and Tennessee who were called upon to help with this mission that the
I don't know if they were called upon. I think the governors of these states, all of which are red states, by the way, just sent their fucking troops in because they're cucked to Donald Trump. That's why no one's worried about Donald Trump deploying the National Guard to red states, because the governors would just fucking do it themselves. Greg Abbott would bring in the fucking National Guard because a migrant sneezed in public. There's no worry about them not complying.
Trump administration has been rolling out.
And what are the plans going forward, perhaps for other cities in other states that, just happen to have Democratic governors?
Right. I mean, it's very clear that the cities that the president is looking at targeting next all are Democratic-run cities. And look, this comes as you said it, but we have some reporting that the Trump administration had been planning for weeks now to mobilize troops to Chicago. That's really where the president has his sights set next. I actually asked him about this in the Oval Office on Friday because he brought this up, and I said,
it's not that they're just Democrat-run cities. It's that they're Democrat-run cities in Democrat-run states and in Democrat-safe states. Also, Chicago, LA, and New York are perceived as the safest of liberal safe havens. And I make this designation because we'll take a city like Jacksonville, for example. Jacksonville has a Democrat mayor, and it is a large city. There are 1 million people that live in Jacksonville. I think it's the most populous city in the state of Florida. Jacksonville also has a crime rate that is above the national average, I believe, a violent crime rate that is above the national average. And yet there's no talk of Donald Trump sending troops to Jacksonville, mostly because it's a red state and Ron DeSantis would fucking do it if Donald Trump asked.
Are there concrete steps that you are taking at this moment to have troops be sent there? Listen to what he told me. You said Chicago might be next. Are you making, have there been concrete steps that the administration is taking to do that? Or what are other cities as well?
I haven't spoken to them. He's grossly incompetent. I haven't spoken to the mayor. No. When we're ready, we'll go in and we'll straighten out Chicago, just like we did D.C.
So as you heard him say there, that they haven't made concrete steps yet. He hadn't talked to Chicago's mayor yet about this, though he went on to criticize him, but that when they're ready, they'll be sending them. He also brought up New York as a potential other city. And as you mentioned, John, keep an eye on Baltimore, because we did see the president and Maryland's Governor Wes Moore trade a lot of barbs back and forth yesterday about all of this. It's very clear, though, I think the bottom line here, of course, is that the president likes what he is doing in Washington. He has said it could be a model for other Democratic cities. And now we are learning that that's exactly what they are planning to do.
Elena Trina at the White House this morning. Elena, thank you very much.
Pardon me if I'm unfamiliar with just how exactly the National Guard works, but since the governor has jurisdiction of the National Guard in their state, couldn't they just fire every National Guard member if they listened to Donald Trump? Is that a silly thought? Is this a fucking baby brain thought? Maybe they can't do that because Gavin Newsom probably would have fucking said something about it.
Well, John, let's talk about Chicago, because Illinois' attorney general says the state is going to prepare a legal challenge if President Trump follows through on plans to send the National Guard to Chicago. Now, the president's push comes as Chicago city leaders say there has been a significant drop in crime in the city. Just last month, for example, Chicago police say homicides dropped 35% and shootings dropped 26% compared to the same time last year. I want to bring in CNN's Whitney Wild in Chicago. So, Whitney, how...
Google AI overview, massive grain of salt here. It says, yes, the state governor can remove a member from active duty, which is a form of firing because National Guard members fall under their state-level command and control while serving under Title 32. Something to consider here if you're Gavin Newsom or if you're Kathy Hoke or JB Pritzker. Actually, you know what? Even if it's not legal, fucking do it anyway. Do you think that any of the shit that Trump is doing is legal? No, it's not. He has entirely foregone the guise of operating under the limits of the executive branch. I think that the governor should just start doing illegal shit too. Who fucking cares at this point? If the president is doing it, the state should do it as well.
How is the city and how are city leaders responding to this possibility?
Omar, given the context that they believe that Chicago represents a success story and the ability to bring down crime, they are shocked but not surprised. I mean, especially because Attorney General Pam Bondi has made clear that cities and states with these so-called sanctuary policies, which limit local law enforcement from working with federal agents to enforce immigration policies, would be a target for the National Guard. Again,
this is a good thing, by the way, just so we're clear. Sanctuary city policies have nothing to do with prosecuting criminals. It has everything to do, however, with allowing undocumented migrants to cooperate with law enforcement to help solve crimes. If you strip a city of their sanctuary status, the police force is not going to solve as much crime because the undocumented migrants that they're trying to work with will be afraid that they're just going to be given up to federal law enforcement.
But not surprised here in Illinois.
And additionally, again, regardless of what the police force feels about the status of sanctuary citydom, they ultimately care more about solving crimes within their own community than deporting these people. In some instances, they care more about that.
Previously reported, this plan has been, in the works for weeks to send the National Guard to Chicago. It is not clear how many troops are coming here. It is not clear when, but leaders here are firing back immediately. Governor J.B. Pritzker said plainly there is no emergency that would warrant this. The Illinois Attorney General says plainly they will fight this in court. Here's more from the city's mayor, Brandon Johnson.
What he is proposing at this point would be the most flagrant violation of our Constitution in the 21st century. The city of Chicago does not need a military occupation. That's not what we need. In fact, we've been very clear about what we need. We need to invest in people to ensure that we can build safe and affordable communities.
What's rich about the crime discussion to me is that it's always a bunch of people who live outside of the city talking about how shitty all of these big blue cities are. Motherfuckers will sit in their house in fucking the suburbs of Long Island, tell me about how dangerous New York City is. Now, yeah, I also live on Long Island, but I'm not fucking afraid to go into New York City. I love going into New York City. It's the same thing, a motherfucker talking about how dangerous Los Angeles is from upstate New York or from South Carolina. Bitch, you've never been to LA. You have no interest in going to LA. You're having a schizophrenic hallucination. You're more likely to be murdered in Texas than in New York City. Are there parts of these places that have higher crime rates than the national average? Yes, certainly. But it's not just because black people live there. It's because these neighborhoods are underserved. The state and local leaders do not want to invest in these neighborhoods. They do not want to revitalize these neighborhoods. They do not want to bring opportunity to the people who live in these neighborhoods.
The federal law enforcement, but they are opposed to any deployment of the National Guard. And he said that the idea that the National Guard would be deployed here without any communication, any partnership with local leaders here represents authoritarianism. So very strong words from leaders here. Again, this is a Democratic-led state. It is a Democratic-led city. So no surprise that they are firing back as aggressively as they are, Omar. Finally, we reached out to the Pentagon. They had no comment. And then, Omar, I'll leave you with this. As Elena brought up, were many states who allow their National Guards to be deployed in Washington, D.C. The dynamics there, as you know, are very different. And so the question here is this going to look more like Washington, D.C., or is this going to look more like L.A.? And the read from our sources, our great reporters in Washington who've been reporting this out, is that this is going to look a lot more like the National Guard deployment in LA. But the question is whether or not these surrounding states, like, let's say, Missouri, Indiana, Republican-led states, can utilize their National Guard and send them into a non-consenting state like Illinois. That is the big question here. We expect to learn more about this as the day unfolds, Omar.
We are just so far removed from any semblance of being a functioning country. The idea that Indiana should be allowed to send National Guard troops into Illinois is fucking insane. The idea that Pennsylvania, right, would be able to send National Guard troops into New York City is an actually preposterous thought. I don't think it should be fucking allowed. That's akin to a fucking invasion. If you think about it, in terms of each state operating as a country, if you have the same thought exercise with the European Union, which is effectively the United States, why the fuck would Greece send troops into Italy and it not be perceived as a fucking threat? If I were JB Pritzker and the governor of Indiana, whatever the fuck their name is, offered to send troops into my state, I would just have him arrested. I would send the police to his house. How about that? Checkmate, dumbass. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're unnecessarily escalating a situation for fucking Donald Trump. Do you realize how little how little influence this man has on your potential re-election chances as the governor of Indiana? Every fucking major political candidate that he has backed throughout his career is a fucking loser. Nobody that Trump has endorsed has had any sort of success in politics because people don't like the MAGA agenda. Do you think like a regular ass person in Indiana is gonna think that this is a good thing to do? No, because they have a fucking brain in their noggin, dude. I saw something that was like Donald Trump's approval rating in Alaska is down to 41%. Do you know how bad you have to be to lose Alaska as a Republican?